Hi, I'm Winnie. And last Thanksgiving, my parents looked me in the eye and said, "Sorry, you have the wrong house." That was the last day I ever begged to belong somewhere I clearly didn't. The plane touched down in Portland just after sunrise. The city was soaked in that soft, cold gray of November mornings, and everything felt quieter than I remembered. I stared out the window of the rideshare, watching rows of pine trees blur past. For a moment, I imagined my mom setting the table, her old playlist humming in the background, my dad complaining about overcooked turkey like he always did. I clutched the pie tin on my lap a little tighter. I hadn't been home in 5 years. The house came into view. White shutters, perfectly trimmed hedges, porch lights still flickering even in daylight. Same as ever. My stomach flipped. I should have called first, maybe. But I wanted this to be a surprise, a reunion, a reset. I rang the doorbell. It wasn't my mom who answered, not at first. A man I didn't recognize opened the door, dressed in a Thanksgiving sweater with a glass of red wine already in hand. He stared at me blankly. Hi? I said, confused. Is Linda home? He turned his head slightly. Linda? Oh, you mean the previous owner. Sorry, you have the wrong house. My smile faltered. No, this is 1749 Mason Drive. This is my parents' house. A moment later, my mother appeared behind him, holding a dish of green beans, her expression unreadable. She glanced at me, lips pursed, then said clearly, "No, this isn't your home anymore, Winnie." I stood there, holding a homemade pie, listening to the buzz of laughter and clinking dishes behind them, the warmth of a family gathering just inches away. And I was standing outside, frozen. Not a single apology, no invitation in, just denial. My mother's eyes didn't flinch. My father never even came to the door. There was a pause, just long enough to snap my reality into sharp focus. The man smiled awkwardly, shifting uncomfortably. My mother looked back at the party, and then they closed the door. Just like that. The pie slid off my arms and splattered on the pavement. People talk about betrayal like a storm, loud, explosive. But sometimes it's just a door closing quietly in your face. And that silence? It's louder than any scream. I walked back to the curb in a haze, my mind spinning. Was this punishment? For what? For leaving? For building my own life away from their curated little bubble? Or maybe it was never about me at all. Back in the car, the driver glanced at me through the mirror. Wrong house? Yeah, I whispered. Wrong daughter. I didn't cry. Not yet. Something colder than tears set in. Something older. This wasn't a fluke. This had been in the works. I just hadn't been paying attention. That night in the hotel room, I opened my laptop and began digging. Property records, legal transfers, court archives. Something felt off, and I needed to know why. What I found was the first crack in the mask they wore, and I was going to peel every layer back. They thought they erased me. But you don't exile someone like me and expect silence. They shut the door. Now I'm going to take the whole damn house. The next morning, the sun rose over Portland, like it had no idea what the night before had done to me. The sky was blue, crisp, clean, as if the world had hit reset. I sat by the hotel window with my coffee untouched, laptop open on a legal document I'd printed an hour earlier. The ink still smelled fresh. I stared at the words like they were written in another language. The property at 1749 Mason Drive had been legally transferred 6 months ago. Transferred to a trust. Signed by Linda M. Harper. But here's the thing. My father's name wasn't on it. The Harper house, our house, the one where I had spent every Christmas, every scraped knee, every Sunday night fight, it was no longer in my family's name. At least, not all of them. And not mine. My name was nowhere. I scrolled back, eyes scanning for loopholes, for explanation, for sense. Instead, I found one signature that made my chest tighten. Lily Harper, my younger sister. The one they always chose. The golden child. She had co-signed the trust. It was like they'd scrubbed me from the family tree. I dialed her number. She picked up on the third ring. "Winnie?" she said, like I'd called from the dead. "I went home last night," I said, voice steady but clipped. "Did you know Mom told me I had the wrong house?" A pause. Too long. "Winnie, maybe you should talk to Mom." "Did you know?" I asked again, sharper this time. I didn't think she'd actually. Lily's voice cracked, but then firmed. "You left, Win. You walked out on all of us." "I left because she called me a burden, Lily. Because Dad told me therapy was for the weak. Because every time I stood up for myself, I became the problem." Silence. I didn't expect a parade, but I also didn't expect to be erased. "You don't understand what they've been through." "No," I cut in. "You don't understand what I went through. I'm not the villain in this story, even if they need me to be." After we hung up, I leaned back in the stiff hotel chair, breathing like I'd just finished a marathon. My fingers trembled over the keyboard. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about identity, legacy, lies. I needed more than signatures. I needed truth. If they buried me, I was going to unearth every rotting secret they thought would stay dead. The next day, I visited the town courthouse. The records room smelled like mildew and coffee, paper thick with time and ink. I requested archived filings under my parents' names. The clerk handed me a folder marked sealed. But curiosity had teeth, and my voice had conviction. "I'm her daughter," I said flatly. "I have a right." He hesitated, looked at me for a long moment, then slid the folder across with a silent nod. Inside, I found more than I bargained for. A second trust, one created 10 years ago. My name was listed in that one, as sole beneficiary. They'd changed it, scrapped it, redrew their lines, and cut me out. What happened 10 years ago that made them give me everything? And what changed 6 months ago that made them give me nothing? Back in the hotel, I stared at both documents side by side. My mind raced. I remembered the night I'd come home from college early, the shouting from the basement, my mom crying, my father's voice, panicked, and then silence. Like the house had swallowed whatever sin they'd committed. Back then, I thought it was about money, infidelity, something small and shameful. Now I wasn't so sure. I pulled up a private investigator's site and began typing an inquiry. If there was a secret, I'd pay for the truth. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear landed on the keyboard. Not sadness, rage, but not the kind that lashes out blindly. The kind that builds cathedrals. The kind that rewrites history. They erased me from the picture. So I'm going to make sure I'm the only thing people see when the frame shatters. 3 days after Thanksgiving, I found myself back in the neighborhood I swore I'd never return to again. The sun was setting behind Mason Drive, casting long, cold shadows across the lawns. Holiday lights flickered on across houses like tiny lies. Warm, pretty, distracting. But I wasn't here to look at lights. I parked 2 houses down from my parents' home. It was still my home in memories, if not in title. Inside the car, my phone buzzed with a message from the investigator. "Got something. Meet me, tonight, discreetly." I stared at the house before me. From this angle, it looked like nothing had changed. But now I knew what was hidden behind those walls. Altered wills, restructured trusts, entire timelines rewritten without me. And if my gut was right, there was more. Later that evening, I met the investigator in the back corner of a quiet bar downtown. He was older than I expected. Worn leather jacket, calloused fingers. A man who had lived more than he talked. "Winnie Harper," he nodded, sliding a manila folder across the table. "What did you find?" I asked. He took a sip of his bourbon. "Depends what you're ready to know." I opened the folder. Bank statements, shell company accounts, property under fake names, and tucked between them, photos. One showed my father, a man I hadn't spoken to in over a decade, entering a building in East Portland. A place listed under one of those fake accounts. Your dad's been making payments to a private medical facility, the man said. Cash, quiet, no insurance trail, my guess. Someone he doesn't want on the books. Who? My voice barely held together. He met my gaze. That's what you'll have to find out. Back in the hotel, I spread everything across the bed. The documents, the photos, the history of people who once called me their daughter. I stared at a record dated back 12 years ago. Emily Harper. Birth date 1992. Deceased. But the medical payments had started after that date. It didn't make sense. Unless Emily never died. The next day, I cornered Lily. She didn't expect to see me, especially not at the cafe where she worked weekends. Her eyes widened when I stepped into line. What are you doing here? Order for a Harper, I said casually. Funny, right? How our name is still in use for everything but me? She moved from behind the counter, dragging me outside. You can't just show up like this. Why? What are you afraid of, Lily? She looked over her shoulder, voice dropping. It's not what you think. There are reasons, things you don't know. Then tell me, I said. Tell me why Dad is paying a medical facility in East Portland. Tell me who Emily Harper really is. Her breath hitched. I wasn't supposed to know. I could see it in her eyes. Panic, guilt, and something else. Fear. I can't talk here, she whispered. They'll know. Who? Mom? Dad? Emily? That last name hit her like a slap. You always were the smart one, she said bitterly. And look where it got you. I left her standing there, trembling. I wasn't angry, not anymore. I was cold, focused. The house wasn't the only thing they'd hidden. They had buried a whole person. And if Emily Harper was alive, if they had been protecting her while cutting me out, I needed to know why. I needed to know who she was to them. To me. That night, I returned to the house. I didn't go to the front door this time. I went around the back. The kitchen window was cracked open just enough to hear voices. My mother, my father, low and tense. She's digging, he said. I told you we should have cut her off sooner. She was never going to stay gone, Mom snapped. You think I don't know my own daughter? She's dangerous. No, she's hurt, and she's not going to stop until she finds... The sound of a dish breaking cut the conversation. I slipped away, heart hammering in my throat. There it was. Confirmation. They were afraid of what I might find. And that meant I was close. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. And they weren't going to survive it. The rain had started by the time I reached the outskirts of East Portland. Not the cinematic kind that invites introspection, but a cold, relentless drizzle that seeped through your clothes, made you feel like the world was trying to scrub you away. I stood outside the gates of Calder Haven, the facility the investigator had mentioned. It didn't look like much from the road. An old stone building half wrapped in fog, tucked away behind ivy-covered fences. If secrets had an address, this was it. The receptionist looked at me like I was just another grieving relative. I'm here to visit Emily Harper, I said. She blinked. The name clearly triggered something. A tightening of the jaw. A flicker of recognition too fast to fake. I'm sorry, she replied, defaulting to protocol. We don't have a patient by that name. I leaned in, kept my voice low. Then maybe you know her by her alias. I have reason to believe she's under protective care. Her records may be sealed, but she's my sister. That cracked her mask. I'll need to speak with the director, she said, rising from her seat. An hour later, I was led down a long corridor, all hushed lighting and polished linoleum. We passed closed doors, each one a possibility, a question with a locked handle. The director, a woman named Dr. Keene, walked beside me. Tall, measured, like she carried truths in her spine, but wasn't paid to hand them out. Emily Harper is not a patient here in any formal capacity, she said. Which means what? I asked. She's not listed in our public database, but she is here. We stopped in front of a plain wooden door. No nameplate, no numbers. She was admitted under a temporary identity 10 years ago. Court ordered. It was supposed to be short term. But your parents, they extended it, repeatedly. Why? She turned to me. That's not something I'm legally allowed to share. I stared at the door. Then can I see her? She doesn't speak, Dr. Keene warned. At least not often. And when she does, it's fragmented. Like memory that keeps unspooling. Let me try, I whispered. The door creaked open into a small, sterile room. Minimal furniture. A large window overlooking a garden soaked in rain. And there she was, sitting cross-legged on the floor, painting a patch of sky onto a blank canvas with her fingers. She looked like me, not just in the bone structure or the hairline. It was in the way her shoulders curled slightly forward, like the world had always been a little too loud. Emily? I stepped closer. It's me, Winnie. She looked up slowly, her fingers smudged with blue paint. And then, she smiled. Not in recognition, but in relief. You came, she said. My throat tightened. They told me you were dead. She giggled softly, like I'd said something quaint. Sometimes I wish I was. It's quieter that way. We talked, or tried to, for over an hour. Her memories were half buried, disjointed. She remembered our dog, Monty. She remembered the smell of pancakes on Sundays. But she also remembered being locked in the attic for days. To protect us, she said, voice flat, because I saw something I wasn't supposed to. What did you see? She tilted her head. You know what happens when you tell the truth and everyone else is lying? They call you crazy. Did Mom? Dad? She nodded slowly. They said I was dangerous, but I was only dangerous to their story. When I left Calder Haven, I didn't cry. I couldn't. My mind was too full, of years that never happened, of a sister erased to protect a family secret so dark it required isolation, silence, disappearance. I called Lily that night. She's alive, I said. Lily exhaled. I told you. There are things. No, you didn't tell me anything. You let them break her. You watched. You did nothing. I was a kid, she snapped. What did you expect me to do? I expected you to remember that she was human. There was silence, and then quieter. What are you going to do? I looked out the window at the city bleeding neon in the rain. I'm going to burn every lie they ever built, one match at a time. I waited until the middle of the night to go back. The streets of Mason Drive were deserted, suburban quiet, the kind that wasn't born of peace, but of things people don't say. I parked across from the house, watching it like it might breathe or blink. Light still glowed faintly from the upstairs office. My father's office. I wasn't here to make noise. I was here to uncover what they tried so hard to bury. I'd stolen the key years ago, back when I still believed home was something you could lose and find again. The back door clicked open like it had missed me. Inside, the air smelled the same, cedar and bleach, with a hint of cinnamon. But everything else had changed. Family photos lined the hallway, polished and updated. Every one of them featured Lily. My parents, even the family dog, replaced. But I wasn't in a single frame. It was more than erasure. It was revision. The office door creaked open. My father's desk was a fortress of order, legal pads aligned, pens capped, folders locked away. But I wasn't looking for what he'd organized. I was looking for what he'd hidden. I started at the bookshelf. Books hadn't moved in years. Dust told the truth. I ran my fingers along the spines until one stuck slightly. Behind a leather-bound copy of the Brothers Karamazov, a manila envelope peeked out. Inside, a handwritten letter. To whom it may concern, if she ever comes back. I sat in the chair and read. The letter wasn't a confession, not in the traditional sense. It was defensive, full of justifications. She was unstable. We did what we had to. It was the only way to protect the family. But it wasn't signed by my father. It was from my mother. A soft click sounded behind me. I froze, then turned slowly. She stood in the doorway, bathrobe, barefoot, but her eyes were sharp as glass. "You always were too curious," she said. I didn't rise. "You lied! About Emily, about everything." She stepped inside, closed the door. She needed to be protected, from herself, from the world, and frankly, from you. What does that even mean? You were always trying to fix things, stirring pots that weren't yours. Your sister was fragile, Winnie. You pushed too hard, too often. You made her worse. I stood up. She wasn't broken. You broke her. She saw something she shouldn't have, my mother said flatly. She told the wrong people. And when the family was about to fall apart, we had two choices: sacrifice the truth, or the family. You chose the lie. She didn't blink. And I'd do it again. I stepped around the desk. I found the old will. I was the heir, not Lily. Because back then, we still believed in you. A beat. And now? She tilted her head. Now? You're just angry, and anger is easy to discredit. We stared at each other in that silence, that long, awful silence where everything real lives. And I realized something. She wasn't scared of me uncovering the truth. She was scared people might finally believe it. I walked out without another word. But I took the letter with me, and this time, I left the back door unlocked. Because the next time I walked in, it wouldn't be in the dark. The courtroom wasn't majestic. It smelled like old carpet and bureaucracy. But for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't standing outside a door someone else had slammed shut. I was sitting at the table where decisions were made. My lawyer, Harris Feldman, leaned in. "They're going to come out swinging," he said. "You ready for that?" I nodded, though the truth was more complicated. I wasn't ready. But I was done hiding. The hearing wasn't just about the house. It was about the will, the trust fund, the altered documents, all tied to a single question. Who did this family ever belong to? Linda Harper entered like she always did. Pristine blouse, quiet heels, spine straight as a blade. My father followed. His silence had become his uniform. Lily sat behind them, eyes down, as if trying to dissolve. Their lawyer stood, aggressive, confident. He tried to paint me as unstable, estranged, ungrateful. "She voluntarily removed herself from the family structure years ago," he said. "She cut ties. She declined invitations. She chose separation." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I stood. "I didn't leave," I said, voice clear. "I was pushed out. There's a difference." Feldman handed over the letter, my mother's letter, to the judge. The courtroom quieted as the judge read, lips tightening with every line. And then, Feldman laid the old trust on the table. My name, sole heir, dated 10 years ago. Linda's expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened against her purse. During recess, I found myself in the hallway with Lily. "You could fix this," I said. "You could confirm everything. The will, Emily, the lies." She looked up. "They'll destroy me." "You're already destroyed, Lil. You just don't feel it yet." She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. "I backed up the original trust," she whispered. "I didn't know why, but something told me you'd come back." I took it slowly. "You just changed everything." "No," she said. "You did." Back inside, Feldman plugged the drive into the projector. The courtroom watched as the original trust, signed, notarized, appeared on screen. My name, my right. And then a video. Security footage from Calder Haven. A time-stamped clip of Emily in her room, speaking softly to the nurse. "Winnie's the only one who didn't pretend," she said. "The only one who didn't act like I was a problem to be solved." Her voice broke. "I wasn't crazy. I just saw something they didn't want seen." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. The judge cleared his throat. "This court finds sufficient evidence to question the legitimacy of the recent trust amendment. Further, Based on submitted proof, the house and assets in question are to be returned to the original beneficiary, as outlined in the 2013 trust. He looked at me. Miss Harper, this property is yours. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just sat there, breathing through a pain that didn't dissolve with victory. Outside, Linda passed me without a word. My father glanced up but said nothing, his eyes hollow. And Lily? She stopped. I'm sorry, she said. Sorry doesn't change the past. I know, but maybe it helps you survive it. I stood on the front steps of 1749 Mason Drive that night, holding the deed in my hands. The same porch where they once shut the door in my face. Now I had the key, but instead of going in, I just sat on the steps and watched the streetlights flicker on. Quiet. Still. Holding my past and my future in the same breath. Because winning isn't always loud. Sometimes it just means the silence is finally yours. Have you ever had to fight for something that should have been yours all along? I stood in what used to be my childhood bedroom. The walls now bare. The air oddly hollow. Dust motes floated in the late afternoon sunlight, suspended like time itself had stopped to remember what this place used to mean. There were faint outlines where posters once hung. Scratches on the floor from a dresser I moved too many times while trying to reinvent myself. It was my house now, but it didn't feel like home. The court ruling had been 3 weeks ago. The papers were signed. The locks were changed. My name was now etched in the city's record books as the legal owner of 1749 Mason Drive. It should have been the end of the story. But stories don't end just because the ink dries. The first real decision I made was to bring Emily home. I expected resistance from Calder Haven. Instead, Dr. Keene had met me in her office, paperwork in hand, already signed. She's more lucid than she pretends, she told me. She was just waiting for someone to want her back. The day Emily returned, she didn't walk through the front door. She ran. Like a ghost relearning gravity. She collapsed onto the living room couch, arms spread wide, head thrown back like she was drinking the ceiling. This place smells the same, she said, like denial and potpourri. I laughed. It wasn't a pretty laugh. It was raw, grateful, tired. She looked over at me and smiled. You always were the only one who saw me. For days, we said little. We just existed near each other. Emily painted. I cooked. We left doors open between rooms, as if proximity could rebuild what the years had broken. And then, one morning, she stood in the kitchen doorway with her old journal. I wrote about it, she said, the night everything fell apart. I nodded, unsure if I was ready. I heard Dad on the phone, talking about money, about hiding something. She flipped a page. He was panicking. I walked in, asked questions. Too many. She turned another page. 2 days later, they told me I was sick, that I remembered things wrong, that I needed help. Her hands trembled, but she kept going. They said it would be temporary, a place to rest. But they never came back. Only Lily. And then, not even her. That night, I sat outside on the porch steps with a bottle of wine and 100 unsaid things in my chest. The air was crisp, clean. And for the first time, it didn't feel like it was pressing against me. Lily arrived unannounced, holding 2 bags of groceries. I figured you might need someone to restock the fridge, she said. You want to come in? I asked. She hesitated, then nodded. Inside, Emily stared at her from the couch. I remember you, she said flatly. Lily placed the bags on the counter and met her gaze. I never forgot you. You didn't visit. I was scared, Lily whispered. Mom said if I tried to help, I'd end up like you. Emily didn't answer. She just stood, walked over, and pulled Lily into the gentlest, most painful hug I've ever seen. 3 broken sisters trying to learn how to be whole in a house that once held nothing but silence. A week later, I held a press conference. Not for revenge, not for spectacle, for truth. I told our story. How a family can collapse silently behind manicured hedges. How mental illness can be weaponized as a tool of control. How inheritance isn't just about money, it's about identity. I didn't name names, I didn't burn them in public, but I let the world know that Emily existed, that she was alive, that we existed. 2 months after that, I opened the house. Not to tenants, not to buyers. To girls like Emily. Girls whose families erased them, whose voices were silenced under the weight of appearances and shame. I called it the open room. One of the first residents told me, "This house feels like it's breathing." I smiled. It finally is. Linda never reached out. My father sent one email. "We did what we thought was right." I didn't reply. Sometimes justice doesn't look like punishment. It looks like absence, like silence that no longer hurts, like a door that finally stays open. What does home really mean to you, and who gets to define it? Sometimes the home you're forced to leave is the very place you're destined to rebuild. I didn't come back for revenge, I came back for truth. And in doing so, I found something stronger than justice. I found freedom, I found my voice, and I reclaimed not just a house, but my worth. Maybe your story doesn't look like mine. Maybe it's not your family that broke you, but a job, a relationship, a system. But listen, what someone tries to take from you says more about them than it ever will about you. And what you choose to reclaim, that's your power. What does home mean to you? Is it a place, a person, or something you're still building? If this story reached something inside you, drop a comment, share where you're watching from, or what part of the story hit you hardest. And if it didn't resonate, tell me why. I'm listening. If you felt this story in your heart, subscribe to this channel. I've got more to tell, stories that matter, that hurt, that heal, stories that remind us we're not alone.